Stella Maris. Is it a flop or is it another McCarthyian masterpiece that we can add to the pile? Today we are here to answer those questions and more in this book breakdown and review of Stella Maris by Cormac McCarthy. So if you are looking to dive deep into the theories, into the influences, and into the style of McCarthy's novels, you have come to the right place. This is the most energetic, creative, and alive McCarthy community on YouTube, and I'm trying to make it the largest on the internet. I already have over 30 McCarthy videos already out, and I have hundreds, yes, hundreds planned for the forthcoming year. So if that sounds like something you are interested in, please subscribe to the channel. And if you want to dive deeper, like Bobby Western in The Passenger, you can join my free Cormac McCarthy newsletter. The link is down below, and just in the next 2 weeks alone, I will be sending out a guide to the best McCarthy secondary sources, an exclusive interview with the McCarthy scholar, and a link to 2 private live streams and chats about McCarthy's work. So also for $5 a month, in the next week or two, I am launching the Cormac McCarthy Course, book club, and Discord. We will be having 3 to 5 live streams and discussions a week, daily discussions on Discord, and hopefully building together the largest and most in-depth McCarthy course ever assembled, all for less than 1% of what you'd pay for a much shallow course at a university. So when that releases, there'll be a link down below, and if you really want to be in the loop when that launches, join the email list. So it is time, everybody, to do our first review and breakdown of Stella Maris on this channel. So let's start with a question. Do you guys think that the dialogue-only format of this novel was successful? And you guys can comment multiple times for all the questions I'll be asking, because I really want to respond and have a conversation with all of you guys and see the range of experiences while reading this novel. So I have to say that this was a banger format. Looking back after reading this for a second time, I don't think that this would have been successful in any other way. And a criticism I've seen levied at McCarthy that this was a good format for him to just do a brain dump. It is 2 people sitting in a room, a therapist and Alicia Western, the patient, and they're talking to each other. But within the stories and in the thoughts of Alicia, we can go on a journey. We can go to the setting because a lot of them have been established already in The Passenger. And as you guys maybe know, McCarthy's screenplays are very good, but they have never been as entertaining to me as his novels. And this is really like a long screenplay without any cues or without any other characters involved. And who do we need to talk to turn these 2 into movies? Because that would be mind-blowing, especially with a major movie company. But as we've talked about on this channel before, McCarthy has been working on Stella Maris and The Passenger for 40 plus years, everybody. I have a video on that on this channel. So I'm sure that McCarthy spent his time thinking about the format for this. And I think it's a very smart decision because Alicia is pretty stagnant as a human being. Yes, she went on the road for a while and she went to Tucson, but as she says, she was reading 18 hours a day or doing math for 18 hours a day, thinking about Bobby, and really not doing that much else throughout her life. So all we have for characterization with Alicia is her thoughts, because her actions are almost not present. She did, travel and study with some famous mathematicians, but I think McCarthy knows that a chapter about Alicia traveling over to Germany and hanging out with these mathematicians, it wouldn't be that interesting because you have to create conflict in the novel. And the conflict is already there with Bobby, with the incest, with him being in a coma and her committing suicide and the whole Romeo and Juliet stuff that is going on within this text. And this is such a powerful and perceptive format because a therapist's real job is to not steer someone in a certain direction. Rather, it's to ask great questions and hold space for someone to make the transformation themselves. And we have McCarthy, one of the greatest living authors, and he is balancing this dialogue-only format, not just with great responses from Alicia, but great questions from Dr. Robert Cohen. And I think it's so funny that McCarthy, throughout the novel, is talking crap about Freud and Jung. And he is not on the forever Jung train, everyone. He calls psychologists, or Alicia calls psychiatrists and psychologists soul doctors. So here's a funny dig at Carl Jung. Dr. Robert Cohen asks Alicia, quote, "Do you believe in a collective unconscious?" End quote. And Alicia answers, quote, "I'd be more likely to credit a thing like that if it hadn't become the property of Dr. Jung." end quote. And this is a big shot at the soul therapist because, as maybe some of you guys know, Dr. Carl Jung's work has been transformed and manipulated by all the Jungians, and it's become a simulacra most of the time of something that never actually existed in Carl Jung's work. And all Carl Jung did with the collective unconscious was bring an idea that had been present in many different societies throughout time to the psychoanalytic world. So of course he's going to receive the credit for that, but he's much like Heidegger, who gets all this credit, but Heidegger just brought a lot of Eastern philosophy into Western philosophy and added it to the system, so he gets a lot of the credit for those ideas. But it seems like McCarthy has a lot of knowledge about psychoanalysis because Dr. Cohen asks great questions, and it's a great dance between him and Alicia, and that's, you know, at the center of this novel. That of course we are trying, you know, we are hearing McCarthy rant about the universe, and we are trying to figure out whatever fragments of information about Bobby and Alicia's relationship that we can. But the real part of this novel is actually the budding, you know, one of the bigger parts of the novel is the budding relationship between Alicia and Dr. Cohen. And we start to see as the book progresses how Alicia is at some level just very detached because they start developing a rapport and talking about things, and she's asking him about his family. But at the soul level, Alicia is broken. She's a fragmented figure, and we'll get into why she is in a second. So I'd like to know your guys' thoughts. Do you feel like McCarthy's writing as a therapist, as Dr. Robert Cohen, is realistic? I would give it an 8.5 out of 10, but there is one small unrealistic part of their relationship. It's that Dr. Cohen seems to know everything about math and science also. And I know back in the day, people most of the time were better read, and maybe Dr. Cohen is the exception, and that's why he gets in and can actually talk and make progress towards suicide with Alicia. But it's not overly unrealistic because at times he asks, like, what are you talking about? I don't know. There's a great line that says, quote, I'm not sure I understand. Mathematics is what? A sort of spiritual undertaking? And as maybe some of you guys know, is that you can BS your way through being competent in something by just asking a lot of questions. That's just the classic Socratic technique. So now let's kind of jump into the meat and potatoes of the book that we all really want to talk about. What the hell did we learn? What did you learn? Let me ask you guys. What did you learn about Bobby and Alicia that we didn't already know in The Passenger? And one of the first things that comes to my mind is that we get to see Bobby from an outside point of view. We get to see his more talented, his more intelligent, but his longing and enthralled sister's perception of him. And for a while within the text, it's kind of like that weird, like, I don't want to talk about him. I want to protect him. I don't want to speak about him until she started to feel more comfortable, because she has this, you know, as we all do, she kind of has this romantic image of Bobby. But McCarthy does such a good job, and even though it's incest, and making you think that she is really functioning with true love, not, you know, romantic love. And I would say that at the soul level, her relationship with Bobby is very loving and very authentic and real. But I think we can agree that we are dealing here with an unreliable narrator. She is a functioning schizophrenic. She's in love with her brother, and they honestly haven't spent enough time together from what I'm seeing to be going as deep as they are going. But that's the inner power of this novel, that there is this torrential force that is supported by the universe, by the scientific theories that are somehow connecting Alicia and Bobby. It's the ultimate contrast within a novel that we have these two figures who are brother and sister, who are not allowed to love each other, forbidden love, but they are mathematical geniuses, and their mother and father created them from the ashes of the Manhattan Project. And this is something McCarthy always likes to do. If you look at especially his earlier Tennessee novels, there's always this kind of sins of the father theme that runs through it, that especially like Outer Dark, there's this karmic force that rides throughout that novel. No spoilers, we'll keep it on Stella Maris. And I think that is an important question to ask. Do you guys think that there is some karmic rhetoric in this text, hidden rhetoric McCarthy's trying to embed again? Because from the amount of suffering that these two endure, it seems like, and McCarthy is using the Manhattan Project as a plot driver, and that is so powerful because as Alicia comments throughout this text, the Manhattan Project is one of the most influential things in history. Quote, but anyone who doesn't understand that the Manhattan Project is one of the most significant events in human history hasn't been paying attention. It's up there with fire and language. It's at least number 3, and it may be number 1. We just don't know yet, but we will. And as some people have postulated before, Twin Peaks season 3 kind of got into this. That's where a new level of evil, modern evil, was created. So the potential energy literally, for Alicia and Bobby to descend is endless. And we see this when Alicia says, quote, "There seems to be a ceiling to well-being. My guess is that you can only be so happy, while there seems to be no floor to sorrow, each deeper misery being a state heretofore unimagined, each suggestive of a worse to come." And Alicia has so much pain because of the detachment of her parents. Both of her parents died of cancer. Speaking of karma from the nuclear blast and, helping create the nuclear bomb, their mother also had supposedly a nervous breakdown, and that may seem unconnected, but it was right in the middle of their Alicia and Dr. Cohen's conversation about the radiation and cancer treatments that her parents received. The Manhattan Project is almost America's darkest moment of the 20th century. Of course, in earlier times, colonization and slavery were terrible, but as a narrative tool involving someone's parents with evil is very smart, because Bobby and Alicia at some level also are trying to achieve liberation. And it's sad though that Alicia seems to have tried to liberate herself through math, and that's unfortunately something, as we maybe see, that made her worse. Okay, and back to the contrast point, we have these two mathematical and scientific geniuses, but they are making the most irrational decisions when it comes to each other. At time after time, I'm like, Bobby, what are you doing? Why are you deep sea diving? Those were some of the better lines in The Passenger about him trying to go into the depths and to discover the darkest parts of himself. And I want to read now where Alicia finally gives us the goods about the start of her romantic relationship with Bobby. Quote, "I thought the fact that it wasn't acceptable wasn't really our problem. I knew that he loved me. He was just afraid. I'd known this was coming for a long time. There was no place else for me to go. I knew that we would have to run away, but I didn't care about any of that. I kissed him in the car. We kissed twice, actually. The first time just very softly. He patted my hand as if in all innocence and turned to start the car, but he put my hand on his cheek and turned him to me, and we kissed again, and this time there was no innocence in it at all, and it took his breath. It took mine. I put my face on his shoulder and he said, 'We can't do this. You know we can't do this.' I wanted to say that I knew no such thing. I should have. I kissed his cheek. I had no belief in his resolution, but I was wrong. We never kissed again." And this section puts us in a very awkward position because I am a Bobby Western fan. I want to see Bobby Western happy and living his best life. But his best life, during this quotation, is him hooking up with his 14-year-old sister when he's 21. I don't think that's the right reality. But do you guys feel like Bobby and Alicia are romantic soulmates? What is driving this romantic relationship? And I think it's because they were so polarized by their education and their experience with parents who were on the Manhattan Project that they are just too different. Maybe because of the science and the upbringing, and we could add karma in there, they are just so different, and they are the only ones who can understand each other. We could say that they are twin flames, that they are dyads in the nuclear inferno. Alicia realizes that she is in love with her blood brother when she was 12 years old. How long was it churning in the unconscious before that? So in one of the climactic moments of the novel, Alicia explains her love for Bobby, quote, "Bone of his bone, too bad. We were like the last on earth. We could choose to join the beliefs and practices of the millions of dead beneath our feet, or we could begin again. Did he really have to think about it? Why should I have no one? Why should he? I told him that I'd no way even to know if there was justice in my heart, if I had no one to love and love me. You cannot credit yourself with a truth that has no resonance. Where is the reflection of your worth? And who will speak for you when you are dead?" And once she finishes saying this, Alicia is sobbing. And you could see that she is polarized herself and feels like, for better or worse, that her and Bobby need to become rebels, that they don't need to practice. Her argument is that we don't need to do what everyone has done before. We can be in love with each other, even though that's happened in the past. And that's a kind of a weak pitch, but she's only 14. Did he really have to think about it? Why should I have no one? Why should he? And I really want to get your guys' thoughts on this because I'm about to make a video on all the negative reviews of Stella Maris. And one of the main criticisms is that Alicia does not sound like a female. And I really want to get your guys' thoughts on this. Does Alicia sound like a female here? Is this a good representation in this book? And let's even say in this quote, we have this 14-year-old girl who is in love, who is a 14-year-old prodigy, who's in love with their 21-year-old brother, who is also a prodigy. Prodigies in math and physics that is. I think a 14-year-old would say, who's, very well developed, why does he have to think about it? Why can't we just do it? She's smart enough to realize that you can take a postmodernist view of reality. This is happening seemingly in the mid to early 60s, this scene when she was 14, and she's attempting a postmodern slice. This idea that you can't sleep with your sister or your brother, that's just a dialect or a construct that we can get rid of. You know, the Christians or whoever tried to get rid of it, because later on she says, you know, not to make the jump, that she wants to have Bobby's kids, and like they should be, you know, scientific minded enough to know that that's not a good idea. And I don't know, you know, if, you know, we see Alicia and she's a schizophrenic, but she's also autistic, and it seems like she is fixated on this relationship, like she has fixated on other things. And something so sneaky that McCarthy is doing within this novel is he's blending Alicia's mathematical revelations with her conception of love and reality. So let me show you guys what I'm talking about. So if we return to the quote we just looked at, the end of it, I told them that I no way even to know if there was justice in my heart if I had no one to love and love me. You cannot credit yourself with the truth that has no resonance. Where is the reflection of your worth? And who will speak for you when you are dead? I think that's a climactic moment, but let me show you guys now 2 other quotes. And these are more at the start of the novel. The first one's at the start of the novel when Alicia is discussing nothingness. Then she references it again, and I think it actually is a dyad of the statement we just read. Quote, if space contained but a single entity, the entity would not be there. There would be nothing there for it to be there too, end quote. And then later on, there's another quote that is referencing the one we just read that says, and the question once again of the nature of that reality to which there was no witness. All of this until the first living creature possessed the vision, agreed to imprint the universe upon its primitive and trembling sensorium, and then to touch it with color and movement and memory. It made me an overnight solipsist, and to some extent I am yet. And to some extent I am yet. So Alicia applies the same logic and actually builds us up for it with this quote on love. Alicia is saying she wouldn't know love unless she became a witness to love. She wouldn't understand the deeper levels of love. Unless the dyad is completed, you cannot understand the reflection of your worth, and there will be no one to continue on your memories when you're dead. And it kind of devolves back down to that solipsistic argument. And it's so crazy that Alicia is a solipsist, because you can see this in her mindset, and that is one of the boogeymen of the 20th century, materialism, solipsism. And I always have thought solipsism is funny, because solipsism may be correct, right? But every single solipsist I've ever known is miserable. And like when I was messing around with solipsism when I was 16, 17, 18, it was one of the darker times of my life. And you can see why. So Alicia is making these shots across the bow in her conception and her chase of Bobby. It's absolutely insane. This, you know, when we look at this as a romance or a love novel, even though it's a little bit weird, it is so multi-layered. And at some level, solipsism and this mindset kind of is a theme within McCarthy's novels. A lot of the characters are detached. They aren't necessarily on a mission from God. They are existing in this very impartial but mythological universe. And that's one of the things McCarthy does very well. He blends science and, you know, a mystical naturalism together. And another question I want to pose to you guys right now is, why didn't Bobby give in? We've seen that Alicia is very attractive, and it is his sister, but he is in mad love with her. However, we didn't actually get that many details about the Horts and about the kid from Alicia in this novel. We've learned a lot, and maybe you could tell me what was the most revealing thing you learned about the kid and the Horts from Alicia's point of view. I think it's a little bit less impactful, because in The Passenger, we were with Alicia as she was having the hallucinations. We kind of now have an expanded and broadened view of the Horts. However, we didn't actually get that many details about the Horts and about the kid from Alicia in this novel. We've learned a lot, and maybe you could tell me what was the most revealing thing you learned about the kid and the Horts from Alicia's point of view. I think it's a little bit less impactful, because in The Passenger, we were with Alicia as she was having the hallucinations. We kind of now have an expanded and broadened view of the Hort, but I think McCarthy wanted to show that it really wasn't the Horts that were driving Alicia's philosophy. Alicia is kind of this crazy philosophy, this solipsistic philosophy where she is living, where she is willing to break some of the greatest taboos and have a child through incest. Those are what's really fueling the characterization more. And Alicia says, quote, that in the end, all problems are spiritual problems. As moon-minded as Carl Jung was, he was probably right about that. Keeping in mind that the German language doesn't distinguish between mind and soul. And Alicia believes that math, at some level, is her spiritual, it's a healer, but it's also a destroyer. Quote, it would be this: the world has created no living thing that it does not intend to destroy. You know, we have centropy and entropy, and we could take this view of our life and love that Alicia loves to take throughout this, that nothing is really permanent. And Stella Maris is interesting because Alicia is on this soul journey that Bobby is not. She is a much more complex and deep character because, as she said, she understands how this reality works from the ground up. She is so good at math and physics and understands so much, and Bobby does too, that she knows the actual makeup of reality. There is no witchcraft needed. Quote, but Bobby does not. Quote, because I knew what my brother did not, that there was an ill-contained horror beneath the surface of the world, and there always had been, that at the core of reality lies a deep and eternal dominion. This is where McCarthy's at his best, and I'm so excited that this is the first time we've ever heard McCarthy really speak about space and really speak about, you know, some of these philosophical topics that he's always penetrated, but now he's actually giving us the objective facts and reality and showing us. But he's showing that there's actually a dark side to it. He's turned his one of his life's passions and his favorite subjects into a tragedy, everybody. This novel is a tragedy. It's so sad, you know, having to read this and go through this with Bobby and Alicia. This is terrible. And somehow McCarthy, you know, when you're reading a book that starts to get a little bit preachy, and, you know, McCarthy's talking about a lot of abstract concepts that maybe some of you guys don't know out here, it's very hard to pull off. Like when you read a political novel or something, if it's too much, it's too much. And somehow McCarthy has kept this very tempered, you know, probably because after decades of editing, you can be really careful with what you say in 200 pages and like include the most important stuff. And that's something that McCarthy did. I feel like it was almost like this book was very similar to the interview that he gave, you know, that hour-long interview or whatever with the Santa Fe Institute. We covered almost all the same, you know, the mathematician that gave up and went to live out and was a goat farmer or whatever. The guy who Alicia went to study with in France, the guy whose name starts with a G. He's got a crazy Wikipedia page. That's what I looked up so many people. I've looked up so many things while reading these books that I knew existed at some level. I've been interested in like pop physics and, you know, entry-level physics, mathematics, and science, you know, I'm a reader. But McCarthy has actually upped my interest. And I don't know if that's just because I'm just some big fanboy out here, you know, the #1 fanboy, like, let's go. I'm gonna dab on McCarthy. It's midnight, everybody. I have work in a couple hours, but I'm finishing this video. And shout out Cormac for bringing knowledge that is very important to the lay person, inspiring people to do the work. For McCarthy to get better at math and science, he had to grind out those skills. It's not easy to develop your left brain if you're more of a creative type. Just like, you know, a lot of my engineering and doctor friends, they aren't that connected to their creative or their emotional side. There are a lot of commenters out there that are geniuses and get every connection but don't feel, you know, see the heart of the novel. And one of my favorite moments where Alicia kind of explains some of this deeper knowledge about math is where she says, quote, I'm not sure I understand. Mathematics is what? A sort of spiritual undertaking. It's just I don't have something else to call it. I've thought for a long time that the basic truths of mathematics must transcend number. It's after all a rather ramshackle affair, for it's all considered beauty. The laws of mathematics supposedly derive from the rules of logic, but there is no arguments for the rules of logic that does not presuppose them. I suppose one thing that might evoke the analogy with the spiritual is the understanding that the greatest spiritual insights seem to derive from the testimonies of those who stand teetering in the dark. And this quote right here really gets to the core of McCarthy's work, that a lot of McCarthy's works puts characters in these liminal spaces, almost in these a priori, eternal, odd realities where they are in the dark and maybe they're moving further into darkness. Most never get into the light, or maybe they stay neutral. But as I talked about in my other video about why Cormac McCarthy writes dark novels, and actually McCarthy comments in a 2011 interview on that, he's a big believer in creating a tragedy in a dark novel. And the whole number is not the highest, and mathematics transcends number blew my mind. I was, you know, the chicken and the egg when it comes to mathematics. I was like, whoa. But through all of this is still such a positive novel. Even though our main character, Alicia, is going toward her suicide, and we see that in the last line of the novel with her dream and her ideas and what she wants to do. Such beautiful writing and prose at the end. A lot of the sequences with Alicia out on the road or when it's, we get a lot of McCarthy's best writing and best moments within this book. Bobby's looming tragedy is on our mind as the novel ends, and the novel's going. And I think McCarthy is at his best here. I think that after rereading The Passenger 2 times and now Stella Maris, doing a reread on it, it connects with all of his works. I think that they are just as good as any of the Southern novels, and maybe as a duo better than even a Blood Meridian. I'm gonna have to think about it. I'm gonna have to reread them all. But some of them, the language, like the end of The Passenger, the last 150 pages of The Passenger or so, 100 to 200 pages, were some of McCarthy's best writing of all time. Some of the most ominous and weird, and he connected it. He brought in so many different elements. We have a Southern character who's out in the woods. He's experienced, in Idaho, he's going through symbolic revelations, mathematical revelations, dealing with love. That's never been actually that big of a theme in McCarthy's works. We've seen it sometimes. It's not like, Lester Ballard was really in love in Child of God. We see some love in Suttree and All the Pretty Horses, some love in The Road, father and son, but nothing ever like this. And I think McCarthy has been preparing for this his whole life. This is a love story. He's writing from a female protagonist's point of view in her 20s. This book is a testament to writing slow and being able to take decades on something. He's been writing these texts since the 80s, thinking about this. These ideas and this life that we are living is larger than how most of it are living. We rush and we are giving away our soul at times. Quote, Satan is only interested in your soul. He doesn't give a shit about your welfare otherwise. So you guys, I'm going to do another huge breakdown of Stella Maris. I'm talking 5+ hours. I'm just finishing up a Passenger review that's somewhat like this video. It's much more organized, and we're doing a deep chapter by chapter, even at times page by page breakdown of the Passenger. So once again, if you guys are interested in joining my Cormac McCarthy community, you should go sign up for my newsletter down below. So many cool things are on the horizon. And I will see you guys in the next video right over here, where I read bad reviews of Stella Maris. Peace.